Hey everybody, welcome back to the Convo Couch. I am Fiorella and I am here with Oz. And we're in the middle of moving, so there was no live stream today. But tomorrow we have Tara Reid coming on. And Friday, I am working on a very special guest who is in Ukraine. and who will be telling us how things are going directly in Ukraine. So I'll kind of put out a little schedule as to what's happening. But Pasta's in Vegas now, and he's setting up the new studio there. And I am still in LA, and I will be leaving LA shortly to an unknown destination. But guys, I just wanted to do a little bit of streaming today because it's Wednesday and we didn't get to stream earlier. And I'm like a night person, but we do our streams early. So for me, it's like weird doing it at night, and there's so many people streaming at night. If it were up to me, I would do like a night stream, but Pasta always wanted like a morning show. And I was like, let's compromise at like noon. And he got his morning show anyway with Steve. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just have a chill kind of stream because of what happened today. There are a couple things that happened. Joe Biden has given Medicare for all to Ukraine, and he's also given them free student debt relief. And I'm totally joking, but it wouldn't be beyond plausibility at this point, considering the fact that Israel has healthcare and we constantly give them money for war, considering the fact that today Joe Biden signed $800 million more to aid Ukraine. And by aid Ukraine, we mean aiding what's left of the Ukrainian neo-Nazi regime. Because if you're paying attention to everything but Western media, you know that what's happening in Western media, what they tell you is happening is actually the opposite of what's happening. Russia has the upper hand in this, not only economically, but also military-wise. They are destroying a lot of the Ukrainian military. There are Ukrainian foreign volunteers that came in that are fleeing. They're leaving through Poland, and they're going away because they're being sent there with no training, very little training, and they're being put in the front lines because the Ukrainian military doesn't care. They just kind of want to show that Russians are attacking them, that Russians are the uncivilized people killing all these civilians and killing all these Ukrainians. So that's really what's happening if you're paying attention to on the ground media in Ukraine, in Russia, and non-Western media. I want to just start off by talking a little bit about what happened today with Zelensky's speech. And I'll go over Joe Biden's speech tomorrow because it's really boring and it's really just nothing. He says nothing. He literally is reading from the teleprompter, and you can tell he's reading because he does his Joe Biden squint, and he's just like as if the brightest light is shining on his face, and he's just like reading it, and it's so obvious. And then he walks off like a robot, and like it's just he can't answer any questions. They asked him about Poland and also in like all sorts of other questions, and he didn't answer any of them. So Oz, let's go ahead and play this first part because I want people to listen to what this man is suggesting here. First of all, he is invoking 9/11. He invokes also MLK. He also talks about the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and he also suggests that they need a no-fly zone, which would mean World War III. We've discussed this before. So let's listen to what Zelensky says, and also note the symbol on his jacket.
In your great history, you have pages that would allow you to understand Ukrainians. Understand us now, when you need it right now, when we need you right now. Remember Pearl Harbor, terrible morning of December 7, 1941, when your sky was black from the planes attacking you. Just remember it. Remember September the 11th, a terrible day in 2001 when evil tried to turn your cities, independent territories, in battlefields, when innocent people were attacked from air. Yes. Just like no one else expected it. You could not stop it. Our country experiences the same every day, right now, at this moment, every night, for 3 weeks now. various Ukrainian cities, Odessa and Kharkiv, Chernihiv and Sumy, Zhytomyr and Lviv, Mariupol and Dnipro. Russia has turned the Ukrainian sky into a source of death for thousands of people. Russian troops have already fired nearly 1,000 missiles at Ukraine, countless bombs. They use drones to kill us with precision. This is a terror that Europe has not seen for 80 years, and we are asking for a reply, for an answer to this terror from the whole world. Is this a lot to ask for, to create a no-fly zone over Ukraine to save people? Is this too much to ask? Humanitarian no-fly zone, something that that Russia would not be able to terrorize our free cities. If this is too much to ask, we offer an alternative. You know what kind of defense systems we need, S-300 and other similar systems. You know how much.
Okay, so the emotional or pseudo-emotional speech that he gave was to invoke this sort of pathos in the audience and to like have a reaction where people were like, who are not educated on the subject, make him look like a victim, make themselves look like a victim. And it's very obvious that that was happening. Joe Biden, in fact, commented on his speech that before he started talking about how much money he was giving them, that it really affected him when he watched it privately. But all I really heard was weaponizing American false flag operations and also American like certain figures and legacies in the United States, considering he mentioned MLK and that sort of like language where he's trying to get people to feel like this is what you should do as an American. You're supposed to support democracy and all this crap. And specifically mentioning 9/11. 9/11, I mean, I'm not going to go into it on this show right now, but 9/11 was primarily caused by the United States and the CIA and their actions thereafter. And it really is something that I would consider a false flag operation. Now, that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. That means that it was allowed to happen. That means that there was intelligence involved. That means that it was weaponized to manufacture consent for war, right? And a lot of people have been talking about that for a long time. And until recently, I think it was still something taboo where people didn't want to say that, or they were called truthers, or, there's so many different things that you could talk about how the whole thing happened. But for most Americans, when they saw it happen, before them, they bought the whole story because they were emotionally manipulated. And the United States government has done this since the Lusitania. This is nothing new. This is what they do. And yet again, they're doing it when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. Zelensky failed to mention, it's been 8 years of bombing and shelling in the Donbas region. It's been 8 years of neo-Nazis killing ethnic Russian, Slavs, and Romani people that they simply didn't like. It's been 8 years that the United States Western media and the Western media in general in Europe has been entirely silent. They didn't care. They completely ignored it. And even when the mainstream media wrote articles about it, there was never a mention of these articles in broadcasting in CNN and MSNBC. Nobody ever talked about it. So it's really hypocritical if you know the history, number one. Number two, they even mentioned Pearl Harbor, which again was another incident that was weaponized to manufacture consent for bombing and to, act like that it was necessary to use a nuclear bomb thereafter as a resort to end a war when it wasn't. And again, this is something that you start recognizing when you see the patterns of regime change and when you see the patterns of manufacturing consent for war. This is nothing new. And Zelensky is an actor. And I don't say that lightly just because, he was an actor before doesn't mean that he could never be a politician, but if you look at the politicians that we have in today's world, Pelosi, who we're going to watch a couple of videos on, and Donald Trump, Barack Obama, AOC, you could tell that these people are trained to have a certain narrative that they manage. You can tell that these people are given a set of lines, a set of speeches, a set of things they're supposed to say. And we know Zelensky was created by Igor Kolomoisky, who also funded several of the neo-Nazi regimes, including the Azov Battalion and others. And so this is nothing new that we're seeing before us. But it's very crazy how he's calling for a no-fly zone, even in spite of multiple people, including some of the most wild people in the State Department, like Jen Psaki, right? She even said with Matt Miller, when they were giving that TikTok rundown, they said that they're not really looking to do that because it would lead to war. So they're even recognizing this. And then he goes and says, oh, and I'm going to give you guys an alternative. I'm going to give you guys an alternative if you want to send us more missiles, more weapons, and blah, blah, blah. And, they talk about how evil Putin is, when in reality, nobody's freaking talking about what we discussed on Monday, which is the fact that these neo-fascist regime in Ukraine just bombed the city center of Donetsk and killed, I think, at least 23 civilians as of the last count, including children. And the media was extremely silent. And if they weren't silent, they turned it around and said that Russians did it to themselves, which makes zero sense, but that's what they said. And now what do? They start talking about, they went from the hospital to this other building that they were talking about today. And they're saying, oh, the Russians did this, but they conveniently forget to talk about one of the worst attacks that have happened in the last 8 years, because it was never of that magnitude. Like I said, the region of Donetsk has been under attack for 8 years, right? This is nothing new. But the level of weapons and the level of funding that they've received now from NATO-backed countries, it has accelerated, and that what the bloodshed we saw, the videos we saw, they were real. Find me videos of people actually of actual, Ukrainian people like that in the same vein. You will not find them, because what's been happening is a lot of the Ukrainian regime, they use these civilians as human shields, and they take over buildings where they know they're going to stash their weapons, like we saw in the hospital, and they clear them out, but they try to make it look like Russians are attacking them. And so this is what's happening if you watch any sort of media other than Western media. And why would a lot of these people who for years spoke out against Western media, for years said that you can't trust mainstream media, all of a sudden start making excuses for it and say, well, this is just Putin propaganda, this is just Russian propaganda, when in reality, if you've ever watched anything from, example, RT or Sputnik, for instance, they don't really, from what I've seen, they don't really have a bias. I mean, they even had radio shows that featured very kind of progressive light, like Democratic light people. Like Jamal Thomas had a show on Sputnik Radio, and to me, he's not that far left. And so I don't understand why people all of a sudden assume that that just because they're named Sputnik or RT, that they somehow can't have a clear view, when they put out a lot of documentaries, they put out a lot of on the ground work. And Redfish Stream, of course, has also been canceled by YouTube, and that's some of the most amazing work I've seen done in all of my time watching media, where they go directly to the source, they go directly on the ground. And we've countless times we've used their some of their videos, because you can't lie about that. That's like direct on the ground interviewing people, which is why I really value that sort of work. So it's crazy to me that this man gets away with that. Do you think that it was a coincidence that he got to speak and then Joe Biden came in and signed a little bill of $800 million for Ukraine. And they had a photo op moment with Anthony Blinken behind him. And it was just this thing that's all made to be in that way, because they want people to feel proud of doing this without mentioning the fact that sanctions are an active siege war and sanctions will kill. And also, of course, ignoring the high inflation, the high gas prices that Americans are experiencing. And I wanted to talk a little bit too about Pelosi, because Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, right? She's arguably one of the most powerful people in the world. Definitely one of the most powerful people, if not the most powerful person in the Democratic congressional party. And she is not okay. And I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you that this doesn't do you any favors, even if speaking from a PR perspective, to have a politician come out and do what she does here, because it doesn't make any sense and people need a translator to figure out what the hell she's saying. It's also the fact that they're lying through their teeth. So that's all part of it. But at the same time, Americans are already a joke to the rest of the world, and I feel like it's just gotten worse. So Oz, let's go ahead and play this video where she just is Pelosi.
But they know that we can't go there. Putin is trying to bait the trap so that we go in, and that's the beginning, could be the beginning of World War III. Putin totally irresponsible, using weapons that are not allowed under the Geneva Convention. Putin, who threatens use of chemical weapons, nuclear, and the rest. So they know that we can't, but it's the ask. Now, he was this morning more. If we can't have a no-fly zone, let us have our own, and we need the airplanes to come in. No. This morning he was less on the ask for the policy, more on let us do it, help us get the planes. But also there is a school of thought that thinks the anti-aircraft missiles and the rest are a very important way. Myself, when I see those tanks, that 40 miles of tanks, I'd like to take out those tanks. I mean, I think that them having more planes might be useful, but that I'm not a military strategist. We hope that we will be able to get up to a place. I hope. You asked me how. I hope that we can get to a place where the MiGs, which are the kinds of planes they've been trained on, can go to Ukraine. The F-16s, especially if we have an excess of them, can backfill for Poland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I felt like bad for her. Like, it's so cringe. Those planes, Nancy, and those tanks. We need to get those planes. And if I saw tanks, I would want to get those tanks. I like I said before, I'll have what she's having. She's having the time of her life. I honestly, I wouldn't want to be in her place. But to me, this is cruelty. I think she needs to go for her own betterment. I don't know if people are out there who are doctors and are experts want to diagnose her. I don't feel comfortable diagnosing people, but I think there's something definitely not okay. And the fact that they allow her to make a fool of herself is really dumb. I don't, but she didn't know what she was talking about. And we've seen Kamala, right? We've seen Kamala kind of do the whole, Russia is a big country and Ukraine is a little country right next to Russia. And and so they don't know what they're talking about. And you'd be surprised how many people that are in power don't know anything that they're talking about. And the reason that when it comes to foreign policy that they get away with it is because a lot of these progressives don't demand it. We talked about it on the show multiple times when there was that seize the house bullshit, whatever it was called, with Marianne Williamson, Brianna Joy Gray, Crystal Ball and some other people, they completely neglected to ask them about foreign policy. Completely, all of the candidates, and their excuse was, "Well, we didn't have time. We only had 5 minutes." I would spend 5 minutes talking about foreign policy more than anything else, because our foreign policy is our domestic policy. Without it, do you not see how it is? Do you not see how Joe Biden is signing $800 million to give to Ukrainians while Americans here are suffering? If you want to look at it that way selfishly and forget the fact that we don't do that for Yemen, we don't do that to Syria, while we continuously arm Israel to continue bombing them, while we continuously arm Saudi Arabia to continue bombing people. We don't do that to countries that don't give us anything in return. Haiti, for instance, we don't accept those refugees easily. When we create regime change in Haiti, and have since God knows how long, like over 30 years, and we continuously do this all the time. But of course, if you don't want to look at it that way, fine. How are you as an American okay allowing all this money and all this attention for Ukraine, a country that most people couldn't even point out on a map, that most people didn't even know existed before they were told to pay attention by the mainstream media a few weeks ago? A country that has been, of course, lacking in complete democracy for the last 8 years, when they were couped and backed by the US and NATO for this coup, taking out Yanukovych and putting in their own puppet. And of course, now here we are, reaping the benefits of, or the atrocities that we've caused as usual. As we can see that the same thing happened in Afghanistan, and we can see how we're framing these sort of like, oh, if there's some sort of biochemical attack, Russia is to blame, the same way we did with Syria. Because if invading a country is bad, Nico posted this really good tweet today, Syria has entered the chat. And Syria would like a word as to why do they get to pick and choose? And as an American right now, you go get gas, it's absolutely freaking ridiculous out there. Everything has gone up. Everything has gone up. Everything because of gas. You have to think about what that affects, what industries it affects. And the fact that I think is people are going to start noticing that, because Americans don't really act until it affects their pockets, because we're not, we haven't experienced like getting constantly bombed and constantly sanctioned all over the world in the same way that other people in the countries that we sanction and bomb have experienced. So a lot of people just don't know how that feels like, and don't know how war affects them. And it's going to affect them. In fact, I think for the first time in forever, they increased interest rates to offset inflation, which is not a great thing, because if you're buying like a house or whatever, that's going to affect you. And so we haven't even begun to see, or better, I rephrase this, we have just begun to see the effects of this proxy war with Russia via Ukraine, because that's what it is. It's our proxy war. It's not Putin's war. It's our proxy war. We are providing most of the funding. We are providing most of the weapons. For what? For Zelensky to send his people to death, because they are not going to. I mean, I have a hard time thinking that they're going to be successful based on everything I've been reading, based on everything I've been following. It's just not going to work. I mean, you have Russia, who has made business deals with China, who has made business deals with India, who has a global south on their side, who will be fine in spite of the sanctions. Yes, the sanctions hurt, the sanctions kill, the sanctions affect poor people. That is not to be dismissed. But in terms of the market, and in terms of their gas, the Nord Stream pipeline, in terms of all of that, they're going to be okay. It is the United States that's going to be paying, having a lot of shortages with wheat, a lot of shortages with gas, is now trying to placate to Venezuela to find some sort of, relief on that issue. And it's the American people that are going to suffer. It's the American people that suffer after every single war. It's the American people, the poor people, the working class people, all the people that get used and weaponized for these rich men's war. And honestly, I think people are going to start to notice that this is happening, especially during the midterms. And I think that's part of the plan. Part of the plan is to get people to be mad at Democrats. Everything goes red, and then they do their whole little fundraising off of, oh, we need to stop the fascist Republicans. We're going to make abortion illegal. And then they go back and forth, but the country keeps moving further into a more authoritarian realm. It keeps, your rights keep diminishing, your civil liberties keep diminishing. You as a person have less privacy. The surveillance state keeps increasing, and you get nothing back. All of the things we are losing that we have lost because of, say, January 6th, because of the pandemic, because of XYZ, we're never getting back. There are people that are going to be wearing masks for the rest of their lives because they're so scared that they're going to get something. There are businesses that will never open in the same way that they were before. There are businesses that will never recuperate from this. There are people that will never recuperate from this. This is all a part of it because they want you to be dependent on the authoritarian, autocratic state. It's not a good functioning state. Even if you're somebody that believes in government, this isn't the government that's going to give you what you want. Even if let's say we would get Medicare for all, what dotted lines and what papers would you have to sign in order to get it? So those are something to think about. Now in this one, let's just watch this one, Oz, because it doesn't get much better than that, but at least she sort of makes sense here.
Mr. President, it is my honor to present to you the Congress of the United States, which has great respect and admiration and appreciation for your courageous leadership. Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. Slava Ukraina! Slava Ukraina! My colleagues, Slava Ukraina! Slava Ukraina!
She's yelling like the Bandera/Nazi slogan. I hope everybody realizes that. I don't think she knows what she's yelling, to be honest. I think she's dumb, but that's what she's yelling. And by the way, I just want everybody to notice Zelensky would never be welcomed if that was somebody that was telling the truth. If that was somebody that was saying, you know what, we're going to end U.S. imperialism. We're going to end this hegemony. We're going to shift to a multilateral type of cooperative relationship between members of the world. You know, that would never, he would never be invited. Or Daniel Ortega will never be invited that way with applause and introduced like that. They sanctioned the guy. He can't even come into the United States, right? And so what does Vladimir Putin do in retort of what just happened with the attack in Donetsk? Well, he has sanctioned U.S. President Joe Biden, the Pentagon, and current CIA chiefs. He also banned Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau from entering Russia. He is based. I'm sorry, Putin is based. That I've been waiting for somebody to do that. For somebody to sanction the United States the way they sanction people, you know, the way they sanction Daniel Ortega, the way they sanction Nicolas Maduro, the way they sanction nations like Syria, Venezuela, Iran, Cuba. But I've been waiting for somebody to say, you know what, we're gonna give you a taste of your own medicine. And it's hilarious. And I think he actually specifically sanctioned a few other people, but it's kind of crazy to me that instead of backing down, Russia is like, nope. And I think it's also with what we've discussed before. I think this is the time because a lot of the criticism they got from other Russians and from people in the region, the Donbass region, is that they should have acted sooner and that maybe this wouldn't have escalated as quickly. And that's a criticism that I think is fair because maybe it wouldn't have escalated to the point we're at now. However, there wasn't the power sort of balance that there is now. And I think that's likely why they were trying to wait and see. They were trying to like sort of figure out like, well, if this was going to continue happening. But the big story that we need to be watching in this, in my opinion, in this regard, is the biochemical labs, specifically because they're being denied or they're being minimized by the State Department. And they didn't get all their ducks in a row, because in one end, Jen Psaki started denying the whole thing, while Victoria Nuland was saying, yes, they exist, but they're biochemical research facilities. They're not laboratory experiments. Vladimir Putin today, while earlier in the last couple of 24 to 48 hours, he announced that they were doing experiments with coronaviruses as well. And he's demanding the United States answer to that. And he did this whole video or this whole speech where he was demanding that they're honest about it, that they come clean about this whole situation. And of course, as you can see, they're not talking about this. They're just putting Zelenskyy out because Zelenskyy is supposed to be the Iron Man, the patriotic hero of the story. That's why they've made him a caricature of like Marvel, and they've like taken his whole appearance and made it some Hollywood movie icon, because they know that works for a lot of people. Unfortunately for them, is I think they overextended their hands when it comes to taking on Russia economically, but they've also overextended their hand as to how stupid they think most people are. I think we're told that a lot of in the media, we're made to feel like a lot of people are agreeing with this, but it's a lot of propaganda. While I think there are a lot of propagandized people and a lot of brainwashed people, I think that the majority of people are now seeing through this. And so that's why we're also seeing the COVID narrative come back in terms of, the PSYOP situation. Tomorrow I want to discuss with Tara a little bit more about what Biden said, a little bit more about the censorship aspect of everything. And I think that this whole thing serves the purpose of specifically being another thing that wakes people up, because the fact that they've been able to take RT, right, completely out of anywhere. You can't watch RT on any sort of direct TV. You can't watch RT on Roku. You can't watch it on YouTube at all. The Spotify shows of people who worked for RT, like Tara Reid and what's his name? What's his name? His show, the comedian guy. I blank out at people's names who I haven't talked to in a while, but he had a show on RT. A lot of people who had any sort of connection to RT. Yeah, exactly. Redacted Tonight was completely taken off. Yeah, Lee Camp. And it's crazy. Like, even if you don't like somebody, right? Even if you're not crazy about somebody, how are you okay with that, with the silencing of these people and their voices, when honestly, to be honest, Tari didn't really talk about, she was talking about sexual assault survival. She was an abuse and a lot of those issues. And Lee Camp, he wasn't really pushing the envelope when it came to COVID, when it came to everything, the pandemic and the fourth industrial revolution. He wasn't really touching that stuff. And it's crazy to me, even as hard as you play ball or as careful as you are, it doesn't matter, guys, because at the end of the day, they're going to come after everybody. And on top of that, of course, it's the Julian Assange denial of the appeal to the extradition, right? And so you can see right now in real time how that plays out. If you are a journalist, if you are somebody that's in any shape or form adversarial to the current narrative, you will be punished, even if you're careful, no matter how much of a fence sitter you are, no matter how how you try to like self-censor yourself, it doesn't work, because it's still going to come after you eventually. And instead of self-censoring, find other avenues to where you can say what you need to say and say the truth, because there is a truth in all of this. There's no, oh, well, there's one truth here in Russia and there's one truth in the West. No, there is a truth. There's history, there's records, there's numbers, there's data, there's a reality that happened in 2014 and before that, during the Orange Revolution. There's all of these things that have happened, and you can't deny that, and you can't talk about this stuff without understanding that context. And unfortunately, what happens is a lot of people become these experts overnight about things that they don't understand, and they take a stance because that's how American politics is created. It's pick your football team, pick your baseball team, pick your political team, pick your favorite TV star, your favorite Hollywood movie star, pick your favorite band. It's the same thing. You have been programmed and conditioned since day one, and it's really, really hard to break that. There's a reason why movies like The Matrix and Star Wars and all these movies that sort of a tease, because a lot of the CIA is involved in the creation of Hollywood. There's a reason why these things are so popular. There's a reason why a lot of the people who have talked about, like Huxley and others have talked about this sort of authoritarian takeover, the sort of authoritarian regime. Orwell, of course, frequently was used by the CIA. And so when you read these books and when you look at the movies that are made, it's no coincidence that this is happening. But at the same time, you have to look at it from the lens of there's a reason they're showing you this, but there's also a reason as to how they frame what they're showing you. And it's not a conspiracy. A lot of the things that we thought were conspiracy 3 weeks ago ended up being true, including the biochemical weapon labs that, according to Russia, are biochemical weapons. And they're at their border, and they're being, it's just, if we had that happen at our border, imagine what the reaction would be, right? So we have to look at it in the context of not being ridiculous hypocrites. Even if you were to say, oh, I don't like Putin, I think he's a tyrant, your feelings about Putin to me are irrelevant. I don't care if you like him or not. It really doesn't matter to me. I don't understand why people have to like bring up like how much they like Putin or not, because that shouldn't be the discussion. At the end of the day, the discussion is about what happened, how did we get here, what are the geopolitical results of what happened in 2014, how are they applying to what's happening now and what can happen in the future. So is World War III coming? I really don't think so. I really hope not, because these two superpowers have too much to lose. Russia is like I said, has prepared itself to be self-sufficient, just like the majority of countries we ostracize, sanction, and vilify. So I have a hard time thinking they're going to continue. They're going to fall for this trap. Now, if the United States unleashes some sort of no-fly zone, if the United States continues to poke the bear, they have to react to that. But the United States seems hesitant to lay too much for Ukraine. And I think what we're going to see is them sort of pretend that they've achieved something when they haven't. So they're going to like frame it like, oh, well, we did this and that, and this was a success, even though we haven't finished XYZ, because they can't frame it as a loss. They will never admit to a loss. Vietnam, a loss. Afghanistan, a loss. But they're never going to admit it, right? And that is what you have to be looking out for. It's not because I'm being optimistic, because I'm really not an optimist. I would say I'm more of a realist. But it's because I just don't see it in the cards. I do think that people like Zelensky, when they say this rhetoric of no-fly zone, when they go and do their little theatric, monologue about how Ukrainians are hurting for 3 weeks and completely about everything else that's happened, they're trying to manufacture some sort of consent for U.S. action. But I have a hard time thinking that the United States is going to go all the way when it comes to Ukraine. I think they're going to use NATO as much as they can to try to do it for them. So yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about. And I do want to announce that Gonzalo Lira will be on the show Friday, and he has been on the ground in Ukraine. He has his own show. He's been really just covering so much, and I'm really interested in talking to people that have been on the ground more than just people that know about this conflict, because there's there's a few people that are really good about this conflict. I think shout out to Mint Press and Dan Cohen for interviewing Patrick Lancaster from PL News, who's been there on the ground as well, who saw the catastrophic and devastating damage to Donetsk and civilians, literal civilians, and who talked about that. So check that out. I always give shout outs to people who are doing like amazing work. I think it's extremely dangerous to be there right now, and it's extremely courageous for people to be reporting from that region because of everything that's happening. So yeah, that's it. Oz, can you read some super rays?
Absolutely. We have some super rays. You've got over 300 on the YouTube, by the way.
Oh.
They must really enjoy coming on at night and listening to Sister Fee's rants. Trey Wright, thank you for the super ray. It's always appreciated on the couch. And Teg Derb Namorga. Yes, I want to laugh at Pelosi, but it feels like elder abuse. I tend to agree.
Guys.
Thank you. And then we've got Carl Marquez with a super ray. It's certainly appreciated on the couch. And Kamshwari Kate. Hi, Kate. And
hi, Kate.
She got another tip. And I think that's all the super rays we have for tonight. It's been a pleasure, Fee.
It's been a pleasure, Oz. So Oz, I will see you tomorrow. I will see all of you guys tomorrow. Thank you for the quick rant. I told Oz I wouldn't keep him long because he has to go to bed early and he has to take his meds and all that stuff. So yeah, and thank you guys so much for supporting our work. I will make an announcement of what I'm doing when I'm ready. But don't worry, the combo couch will be here, or the combo team will be here. And we will keep doing what we're doing. Thanks so much for the support. We'll see you tomorrow at around noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. Convo out. Bye, guys.